we have seen that the real number system R under addition, multiplication, and the order less than is going to be an ordered field. In fact, Q, the set of rationals, is also going to be a field which is going to be an ordered field, obviously, but sitting inside R. We know that Q is a proper subset of R, but fundamentally Q and R are different, not set theoretically only. So as ordered fields, how they are differing, that is what we are trying to answer in this lecture. What is going to happen is the following. With this order, R is becoming a complete ordered field while Q is not. We'll try to explain what we mean. Just recall our definitions of bounded sets and infimum as well as suprema. So our definitions were like this. You just take any subset S of R. S is said to be bounded above if S may have some pieces like this, so many pieces like this, and we are just saying that U, a number, a real number U, remember that U, a real number, it is going to be an upper bound provided every member S from S is less than or equal to U. So once you selected an upper bound as U, any number greater than U also going to be an upper bound. So certainly it is interesting to look at what is the least of all upper bounds of S. That we are trying to define it as the least upper bound or supremum of S. That is what is the least upper bound. In a very similar fashion, you look the whole scenery from the left instead of right. You look at the same phenomena from the left, that is S is said to be a bounded below set. If you are able to find some real number W such that W is going to be less than or equal to S for every member S in S. So what we can say is, once you selected a lower bound, any number, any real number less than W is obviously going to be a lower bound. So the relevant question there becomes, which is the greatest of all lower bounds? That is usually denoted by GLB or infimum of the set S. So supremum of the set S as well as infimum of the sets are relevant, and we will just try to say a little bit more about them. But obviously remember that terminology, once set is bounded, it means bounded from above as well as below, and unboundedness means it is not bounded. So from these definitions, just switch over to the notion of supremum and infimum once again. As I explained, S is any non-empty subset of R, and if S is bounded above, U is said to be a supremum or a least upper bound, provided U is an upper bound for S and V is any upper bound of S, then U is less than or equal to V. It is the least of all upper bounds. That is what we are trying to say. So all these pieces of S in this figure, supremum is happening somewhere here. Anything beyond that, I mean the right to that, is obviously going to be upper bounds of S. Very similar argument one can give with the below side also, as I mentioned. So that gives the notion of infimum, certainly. So if it's a bounded below set, infimum of the greatest of all our bounds, GLB we will write, is nothing other than that W is said to be a GLB or an infimum of the set S. It is going to be a lower bound. After that, any lower bound if you are taking, that would be less than or equal to W. So every where what happens on this side is going to be lower bounds for S in this figure. But we are just saying that in definition a supremum or an infimum. But a moment's thought will reveal that once it exists, for example, supremum our definition is least of all upper bounds. Then definitely it's a unique one. Once it exists, it's a unique one. See, that's easy to argue. For example, if u1 and u2, you are taking both are suprema for the set S, then what will happen? See, u1 and u2 are real numbers. So by trichotomy, one of the three conditions holds: u1 less than u2, or u1 equal to u2, or greater than u2. So if u1 is less than u2, then what we can argue? u1 less than u2, then the hypothesis that u2 is a supremum, right? u2 is a supremum means u1 cannot be an upper bound of S. Very similar argument will say that u2 less than u1 is also not possible. So the only possibility is u1 equal to u2. So once the supremum exists, it's a unique one. u1 must be equal to u2. That is what we are trying to look at. Similar argument one can give it for infimum also. Whenever infimum exists, it's a unique noun. So the supremum or the infimum you can talk for. Now let us reformulate these ideas of supremum as well as infimum. Just concentrate on supremum first. See, while talking about supremum, our S may be somewhere here and somewhere here. So altogether these pieces are going to be the parts of S, and we are marking U as the supremum. So how to, two conditions are given as the definition. The first condition was U is, for the supremum I am talking about first, it should be an upper bound. So how to restate it? Any member S, if you are looking at S less than or equal to U, will do. It will substitute the thing if you like. What is the second condition? Second condition should ensure that no number less than U is going to be an upper bound. That we can restate in many ways. Just we can have a look at what are the reformulations. The first condition is obviously you can do like this. Second condition, that is, if V is any upper bound of S, then U is less than or equal to V. Because U is going to be the supremum, it is going to be the least of all upper bounds. So select any upper bound that one can replace it by the notion 2. That is just a restatement what you are writing it out. Least of all upper bounds. But that can be reformulated like this. If you are taking, see, the position of our U is something like this. Geometrically, if you are trying to analyze, if S is like this and our position for U is somewhere like this. So if you are selecting any Z which is strictly less than U, that is not allowable as an upper bound. That is equivalent with the second condition. So these two are going to be equivalent. That is one more way of reformulating the second condition. That can be further redefined or understood as follows. You take any set which is less than U, then existence, see, somewhere you are selecting some set which is strictly less than U. So some member of S should be there in between. I mean, in a set is strictly less than, greater than Z, some S set should be available there. Some member from S should be available there. Otherwise, set should be an upper bound. These type of all upper bounds like that. So that's not possible. So these two are also going to be equivalent. Another way of stating this idea is as follows. See, U is going to be the least of all upper bounds. So you have no freedom to go to the left for selecting as a least upper bound. So how will you say it more precisely? Mathematically, you start with any positive epsilon. Then you look for U minus epsilon. U minus epsilon definitely will make you left to U, strictly left to U. So in that gap you should be assured with some existence of members from S. That is what is 2 triple dash. Start with any epsilon, positive epsilon, then u minus epsilon, that is strictly less than u, certainly. So it is not going to be an upper bound, which should ensure that some member, I may write it as S epsilon from S, should be available in between u minus epsilon and u. That is another way of saying it precisely. So instead of 1, we can replace by 1 dash the definition. Instead of 2, any of the 3 conditions I can replace it. So one can easily restate the definition many avatars or fashion. So just as a lemma, I will write it down the last one. So an upper bound u is given for you for a non-empty set S of R. That fellow is going to be the supremum. Supremum means least upper bound of S if and only if start with any epsilon positive, then what happens is u is somewhere here. Geometrically, if I am writing it down, then if you look at u minus epsilon, again the guarantee for S epsilon, existence of S epsilon is given there. So such a condition holds, then u is going to be u is also an upper bound, then obviously it is going to be a least upper bound. Once this condition is given, u is going to be the supremum. Once, on the other hand, u is the supremum, then it will come back. That is what it's trying to say, but it's easy to look at. See, suppose the stated condition holds, that is for every epsilon this part is available with u. U is given to be an upper bound. You have to say that, further say that it is going to be the least. So select any v which is less than u. That is not going to be an upper bound. You have to show. How to show that? See, v is differing and v is strictly less than u. So u minus v is a positive number, and that you can take it as epsilon. Now it is a positive number. So the given condition assures you that u minus epsilon is less than S epsilon. Such an S epsilon is available in S. So that will give everything, because our epsilon is v minus u. So this epsilon you put it on here. So what it says is simply v is going to be u minus epsilon, right? That is less than S epsilon. So what you are going to get is v is less than S epsilon. S epsilon means it's a member in S, which means v cannot be an upper bound. This settles the problem. So u that you are selected as u, that is going to be the least of all upper bounds. It is the supremum of S. That is gives that once you are assuming the condition, you will get that u is a supremum for that. Now let us look for the other part. That is, you assume that u is a supremum of S. We can just get the given condition then. So how to prove that? That is also straightforward, because once you are taking u as the supremum of S, start with any epsilon greater than 0. So obviously u minus epsilon is going to be strictly less than u. So u minus epsilon cannot be an upper bound. So existence of some member must be there. That S from S should be there, and it must be greater than u minus epsilon. Rewriting it, you will be getting u minus epsilon is less than S epsilon. So one can just restate, or we can take another characterization for supremum using the definition in this level. Any of these conditions can be used, 2 dash, 2 double dash, 2 triple dash, or anything. Now such lemmas one can manufacture in the ideas of infimum 2 or greatest lower bounds also. In the same fashion you can do like that. So this is the interplay with such things, and let us look at more closely about this through examples. What will happen for this infima as well as suprema. Whatever be the Since we are talking about suprema is hold for infima also. Just we can look at some examples to make it clear. See, obviously, if I am taking S, my set S, which consists of finite number of elements, something like x1, x2 up to xn, a non-empty set, a finite in number if I am taking. What can you say about supremum of S? That is the first question. Or infimum of S? See, suppose I am taking my set is containing only one element. Obviously, I have supremum as well as infimum. It will be coinciding. Can I work with induction? I can use induction to say that if I am having finitely many elements in S, I can always have a largest element, right? So if that largest element is U, if I am denoting it as that, obviously that is going to be supremum of S. Using induction, one can easily prove this idea. So any finite set, if you are looking at, the largest element makes, obviously the largest element will be the supremum of S. I will write down supremum of S because it is unique, so I will write this notation. And if W is the smallest element or the least element, that also exists for a finite set, then that is going to be the infimum of S. These are the notations we are going to adopt. So for a finite set, always supremum as well as infimum exist, and they are respectively the largest element as well as the least element of them. So it's these ideas is supremum and infimum is, in some sense, they are generalization of these concepts. So this is a discrete case. We will just look for more better examples. Let us work with some interval, for example. Let me write down an interval. I may write it as S now as defined to be those real numbers in R for which 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 1, usually called the unit interval. So geometrically, what I am discussing is I have 0 here, 1 here, and everything included in between 0 and 1. This part is going to be my S. This is what is my S now. So question is whether this set is, first of all, I have to look at whether it is bounded. Bounded means bounded above as well as bounded below. From the definition, it is clear that 1 is an upper bound. So the definition is like that. You are just simply dominating all the members of S by 1. So 1 is obviously a upper bound. So 1 is an upper bound. Once it is a bounded above set, the question arises whether supremum exists. In fact, Moment's thought will give you that 1 itself is going to be the supremum, a least of all upper bounds. How to prove that? See, suppose I am taking a V. I can use the previous lemma. If I am taking a V which is less than 1, it is not going to be an upper bound of S. Can I prove that? See, if my V is somewhere here, obviously so many elements are here, right? So many elements from S are here and V is less than, such that V is less than S. But if I am I'm inside somewhere here, somewhere, then can I produce some S epsilon in between? That is the question after the lemma. How to do that? Obviously, you can find an element from here because once V is somewhere here, I can just go for the halfway in between V and 1. V to 1, I have to look at V is less than 1 or equal to 1, right? So I can again produce some members from here. If is, for example, V is strictly less than 1, I can go for the halfway in between them. If V is 1, that's all. So I will settle the problem. So only possibility is the least of all upper bounds, because any V is strictly less than 1, I'm not going to get as an upper bound. Always I'm going to get like that. Some members will come out from S will come out. So conclusion is supremum of my S is nothing other than that 1. Very similar argument I can use it for infimum of S. 0 is a lower bound for the set. It is going to be the greatest of all lower bounds. Right? That also I can prove. No number greater than that is going to be a lower bound. So in this case, my set S has supremum as well as infimum. Supremum is also available in S. Infimum is also available inside S. It is not compulsory that you have to be inside. See, for example, I may just change my set as S1. Simply, I will look at all the real numbers in between 0 and 1, but I am excluding 0 and 1. So, what happens geometrically is the open bounded interval, I can say. Everything in between 0 and 1, excluding 0 and 1. So, what about boundedness? Obviously, it is bounded because 1 is going to be an upper bound, 0 is going to be a lower bound. Once again, the similar argument will give you that 1 is going to be the supremum of my S1. Infimum of my S1 is going to be 0. Very similar argument. But remember, in this case, supremum exists as a real number. That is 1. But it is not available inside the set. That should be noted. Infimum also is like that. It is not available inside. So, always whenever we are talking about supremum as well as infimum, it may be available in real numbers, you are saying, as real numbers. It's not compulsorily inside the set. That we are not asking to do for the definition. Remember that. So various other examples one can try it. So let us look for the most important property, what you are aiming at, which is known as the completeness property now. We'll just introduce what it is. So just start with any non-empty subset S of R. Then if it is bounded above, that is, if it is having an upper bound, automatically supremum of S exists. That is what it guarantees. Any set, any non-empty subset of real numbers which is bounded above or which is having an upper bound should possess a supremum. That is, least upper bound exists. The existence of the least upper bound. So you are just filling the gap somehow. So always there exists a supremum for any non-empty bounded above set. That is the fundamental crucial property which is known as the completeness property of R. Or we can state that we can just say that it is a supremum property also, because it guarantees a supremum for all non-empty bounded above sets. So R as a field, as an ordered field, has the completeness property, which means any non-empty bounded above set definitely has a supremum inside. So what about the infimum property? One can state infimum property also equivalently. What should be that? You start with any non-empty subset, which is going to be a bounded below set. So lower bounds are existing. Then we can just state that it's also true. I mean, in the sense that infimum property is also true. Any non-empty bounded below set always has an infimum in R. That is the infimum property or equivalently completeness property. In fact, they are equivalent in some sense, right? Because if I am having the supremum property means every non-empty bounded above set has an upper bound, then I can prove the infimum property easily. How can I do that? It's quite simple. What you have to note is the following. Suppose S is a bounded below set, right? S is a non-empty set. Now I know that S is bounded below So I have to say that it is having an infimum. So infimum of S exists in R, I have to say. How do I do? See, once I am having S, I can just form another set. By notation, I may write S bar. This consists of all minus S, I mean additive inverse of S. S is available in S. All the additive inverses, if I am looking at, what happens? Once S is bounded below, obviously just a moment's thought will reveal that S bar is bounded above. So once it is bounded above, I will get a supremum there because of the supremum property, right? So once I am getting an element, V, for example, the supremum, just look at additive inverse of that. Then I will we can prove that it is going to be the infimum of S. Because the bounded below set, just take all the additive inverses of that. On that set is going to be bounded above. So some supremum, some member as supremum in R is existing there. Just for the additive inverse, you can verify that it is going to be the infimum of S. So completeness property, either one can call it as supremum property or infimum property. Both will be, once it holds, the other side is also coming back. So that makes all the things easier now. How to differentiate from Q to R? That is our fundamental question we have started with. So what I wanted to conclude now is R is going to be a complete ordered field. So R as a field under addition, multiplication and order, this is an ordered field, and completeness property is holding for R. But what we are going to see next is you look for your subfield. Q is a subfield. In fact, it's an ordered subfield. But you will see later that this is not going to be a complete one. We'll miss the supremum or infimum property like that. That we will discuss later.